At an unspecified millisecond before dawn on February 1st, the electronic surveillance grid covering the Catalina Foothills neighborhood experienced a catastrophic fracture. The continuous data streams feeding dozens of residential security servers abruptly terminated without warning. This technological blackout created a highly specific temporal void within a heavily monitored environment. During this precise window of electronic blindness, an 84-year-old woman vanished completely. Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her primary residence without generating a single pixel of visual evidence. The surrounding property boundaries are monitored by multiple overlapping optical lenses and motion detection sensors. These devices operate continuously to record every physical anomaly occurring within their designated spatial parameters. Yet the system logs from that Sunday morning reveal an absolute vacuum of diagnostic information. The municipal authorities and federal investigators immediately encountered a terrifying logistical paradox at the crime scene. The command staff deployed forensic technicians to analyze a location that completely failed to record its own breach. How does an unidentified individual infiltrate a technologically saturated sector and extract a biologically fragile target? What specific operational tactics allow a human being to bypass dozens of active infrared cameras undetected? The answers do not exist within the physical boundaries of the primary residential crime scene. The truth resides exclusively within the missing minutes of the neighborhood digital surveillance archives. If you want to understand the modern vulnerabilities of residential security networks, you should subscribe to Unsolved America. We systematically analyze the data anomalies surrounding the most complex, active investigations across the country. The absence of video evidence in this particular incident is not a random technological failure. The missing footage represents the first documented layer of a highly calculated and methodical intrusion. The perpetrator understood the exact operational limitations of the local digital infrastructure before initiating physical contact. They identified the precise structural weaknesses of the Catalina Foothills neighborhood optical network. To comprehend the magnitude of this electronic evasion, we must first mathematically map the surrounding environment. We must evaluate the overlapping fields of view that protect these suburban residential properties. The geographical layout of the specific neighborhood presents a significant physical challenge for any undetected movement. The properties are situated on elevated terrain, providing clear lines of sight across multiple driveways. The local homeowner association guidelines strongly encourage the installation of high-definition exterior monitoring hardware. Consequently, the street is saturated with commercial-grade doorbell cameras and motion-activated floodlight systems. These optical devices utilize advanced passive infrared sensors to detect the slightest thermal shifts in the environment. A standard residential block in this specific geographical sector contains approximately 30 active optical recording units. The lenses are mathematically positioned to capture vehicular traffic and pedestrian movement along the primary access roads. The intersecting viewing angles create a comprehensive digital mesh designed to eliminate potential optical blind spots. An individual walking down the center of the asphalt would trigger at least 5 sequential digital recordings. The data packets are instantly transmitted to remote cloud servers via high-speed localized broadband connections. This continuous external uploading process ensures the preservation of visual evidence even if the physical camera is destroyed. The local residents rely entirely on this invisible electromagnetic shield to secure their physical residential perimeters. They sleep comfortably, believing the technology will automatically document any unauthorized presence on their private property. The demographic profile of the neighborhood consists primarily of retired individuals seeking quiet and secure environments. Nancy Guthrie perfectly matched this specific demographic distribution regarding advanced age and severe physical vulnerability. She is 84 years old and relies heavily on a surgically implanted pacemaker to survive. Her daily biological functions require careful cardiovascular management and strict adherence to specific physical limitations. Her ambulatory capacity is severely restricted by age and ongoing medical monitoring requirements. She lacks the necessary physical strength to quickly traverse the uneven desert terrain surrounding her home. Escaping the immediate property boundaries would require a slow and deliberate physical effort spanning several minutes. This extremely slow rate of travel theoretically maximizes the probability of optical detection by the surrounding cameras. A person moving at a significantly reduced velocity remains within the sensor field of view for an extended duration. This prolonged exposure provides the infrared algorithms ample opportunity to process the specific thermal signature. The advanced motion detection systems require only a few milliseconds to identify a human profile and initiate recording. Therefore, the biological reality of the victim directly contradicts the absolute absence of verified video evidence. The installed cameras are explicitly calibrated to detect this exact type of slow and continuous biological movement. The fact that the entire local network failed to register her departure indicates a targeted systemic manipulation. The digital shield protecting the community did not fail due to a random meteorological or hardware malfunction. The municipal surveillance infrastructure was weaponized to provide a seamless dark corridor for an undetected physical extraction. The optical devices designed to illuminate the darkness were forced to turn a blind eye to the physical event. The false sense of security generated by these glowing lenses is the most terrifying aspect of the investigation. The residents assumed the constant wireless transmission of data guaranteed an impenetrable fortress of continuous digital observation. They ultimately discovered that a perfectly functioning surveillance system merely records the specific boundaries of its own limitations. The invisible wireless architecture of the neighborhood network became the ultimate tactical advantage for the prepared perpetrator. The electronic perimeter was silently compromised without alerting a single homeowner or triggering an automated emergency alarm. We must carefully reconstruct the exact chronological sequence of the final recorded hours to understand this systemic failure. The server logs provide a rigid framework of verified data points immediately preceding the catastrophic network blackout. The timeline of verified visual evidence concludes definitively at 9:50 on the preceding Saturday evening. Tommaso Cioni drove his mother-in-law to her residence following a standard weekend family dinner. The vehicle approached the property and successfully triggered the primary exterior motion detection sensors on the driveway. The digital recording units activated perfectly and captured the physical transfer in high-definition video resolution. The optical footage documents the car entering the driveway and the subsequent closing of the automated garage door. The sensitive optical sensors registered the thermal signature of the internal combustion engine and the environmental light changes. The remote cloud servers received and successfully archived these specific data packets without any network interruption or packet loss. This ordinary sequence of domestic events proves the local surveillance infrastructure was operating at peak technical efficiency. The external hardware components and the broadband transmission lines functioned exactly according to their original manufacturing specifications. The subsequent hours of the late evening produced 0 anomalous diagnostic readings across the entire residential block. The neighborhood cameras maintained their passive observation mode as the ambient environmental temperature dropped steadily overnight. The continuous digital silence remained unbroken until the following morning when the family initiated a standard welfare check. Nancy Guthrie failed to log into a specifically scheduled online church service on that Sunday morning. This uncharacteristic deviation from her highly structured weekly routine prompted immediate concern and a rapid physical response. Family members arrived at the physical residence and encountered a completely undisturbed exterior physical environment. The physical doors remained securely locked, and the perimeter windows showed 0 indications of attempted forced entry. The architectural integrity of the physical house provided no immediate visual clues regarding her sudden biological absence. They immediately accessed the commercial cloud storage interface to review the doorbell camera footage from the previous night. They fully expected to find a clear visual record of her stepping outside into the morning desert air. The mobile user interface displayed the successful recording of the vehicle arrival at exactly 9:50. The digital system then revealed a massive and completely unexplained gap in the continuous operational data timeline. The digital archive contained absolute unrecorded static during the most critical hours of the early morning. The wireless connection between the physical hardware and the remote server had been deliberately and precisely severed. The external camera did not simply stop recording due to a standard localized electrical power failure. The entire neighborhood electrical grid maintained consistent power throughout the duration of the targeted digital time frame. The electronic interruption was highly localized and restricted strictly to the specific data streams originating from the target property. The investigating police officers arrived and immediately attempted to canvass the surrounding residential digital surveillance systems. They requested urgent access to the external cameras mounted on the properties directly adjacent to the victim. They required immediate visual verification of any vehicular traffic, utilizing the primary access road during the localized blackout. The neighboring digital system successfully recorded the standard morning traffic, including commercial delivery vehicles and local residents. However, the critical hours matching the localized digital blackout yielded absolutely zero visual data of the perpetrator. The adjacent optical cameras captured nothing but the empty asphalt street illuminated by the surrounding security floodlights. The unidentified perpetrator did not utilize the main residential thoroughfares to extract the victim from the immediate area. They successfully navigated the physical environment by mathematically mapping the exact blind spots of every active optical lens. The federal authorities did not find a digital record of a confused elderly woman wandering away from her home. They discovered a highly sophisticated data void carved into the neighborhood wireless grid with absolute surgical precision. The realization that the cameras were actively blinded introduces the first terrifying analytical layer of this mystery. The missing minutes on the specific timeline represent a calculated operation executed strictly in the spaces between the lenses. The forensic investigators are left staring at blank screens, while a targeted physical extraction remains completely unrecorded. The absolute absence of data confirms the presence of an adversary who understands local network architecture perfectly. The continuous digital silence is the loudest and most intimidating piece of forensic evidence currently available to the authorities. The hypothesis regarding a simple localized router malfunction dissolves completely upon examining the secondary forensic data. Law enforcement officials successfully subpoenaed the biometric server logs from the medical device manufacturer. This specific corporate archive contains the continuous cardiovascular telemetry of the missing 84-year-old. The federal technicians discovered a highly disturbing correlation hidden deep within the raw, encrypted binary code. The internal cardiac monitor ceased transmitting biological health data at the exact same measured millisecond. The external security perimeter and the internal biological safeguard experienced a perfectly synchronized catastrophic failure. This precise temporal overlap eliminates any statistical probability of a random residential equipment malfunction. You are observing a highly coordinated electronic attack against both residential infrastructure and human biology. If you want to analyze the raw data behind these complex federal investigations, you should subscribe to Unsolved America. We continuously monitor the technical forensic developments surrounding this unprecedented digital crime scene. The synchronized termination of these distinct transmission networks requires highly specialized electromagnetic interference equipment. This level of technical sophistication indicates months of deliberate and highly calculated operational preparation. Federal authorities recently validated this premeditation theory by recovering two heavily fragmented optical files. These specific digital recordings originated from a neighboring property on January 11th and January 24th. The recovered pixels display a solitary, unidentified silhouette, operating at the extreme edge of the property line. The shadowy figure is actively mapping the specific parameters of the residential optical network. We strongly encourage you to directly analyze the visual evidence currently displayed on your screen. Observe the precise angle of the shadow, projected across the residential lawn in the January 11th file. The ambient lunar illumination perfectly highlights the exact boundaries of the infrared camera blind spots. The intruder did not simply hide within the random darkness of the suburban neighborhood. They weaponized the specific orbital trajectory of the moon to calculate their exact infiltration route. The suspect utilized natural celestial illumination to navigate the overlapping digital surveillance fields undetected. This terrifying environmental awareness demonstrates an adversary possessing elite tactical reconnaissance capabilities and extreme patience. The chronological timeline of the blackout is no longer a simple wireless network error. It represents the exact moment the tactical operator executed their primary physical extraction protocol. The digital void contains the only accurate record of the physical interaction at the target residence. The dual failure of the transmission systems forces investigators to confront a horrifying biological possibility. The medical server disconnection could indicate the deployment of a localized wide-spectrum frequency jammer. It could also represent the exact moment the cardiovascular system of the victim completely failed. Did the intruder merely silence the biometric transmission using an advanced military electronic device? Or does that specific missing millisecond document a fatal physical event occurring directly on the concrete porch? An advanced electromagnetic frequency jammer can successfully explain the sudden absence of the digital video stream. It cannot adequately explain the physical presence of human biological fluid on the exterior concrete surface. The crime scene technicians discovered a highly concentrated volume of blood positioned directly near the primary entrance. Laboratory diagnostics definitively confirmed the genetic profile belongs entirely to the missing elderly victim. This concrete biological reality completely shatters the sterile perfection of the digital network manipulation. The investigators must reconcile a flawless electronic infiltration with a highly chaotic physical injury. The spatial distribution of the biological material presents the first major analytical tension point. If the physical trauma occurred before the technological blackout, why did the optical sensors fail to record the event? The camera possessed a clear and unobstructed line of sight to that specific concrete surface. If the trauma occurred after the blackout, how did the suspect navigate the dark environment so efficiently? The presence of the fluid indicates a significant loss of physical control during the extraction process. The federal authorities have officially verified the genetic match of the recovered fluid sample. They are actively investigating the specific fluid volume to determine the exact severity of the physiological trauma. The forensic technicians noted an absolute absence of secondary transfer evidence across the surrounding residential property. The suspect managed to extract a bleeding target without depositing a single microscopic drop elsewhere. This impossible physical feat introduces the next major complication into the complex forensic timeline analysis. The distance from the primary concrete porch to the absolute edge of the camera network is 50 meters. The perpetrator successfully moved the incapacitated victim across this specific geographic distance without leaving any physical trace. They accomplished this extraction without triggering a single motion sensor on any adjacent residential property. The regional law enforcement agencies systematically analyzed every optical recording from the surrounding neighborhood boundaries. They focused specifically on the primary access roads located at both ends of the residential block. The digital archives confirm absolutely zero vehicular traffic entered or exited the sector during the critical window. The invisible tactical operator did not utilize a standard motorized transport vehicle to execute the exfiltration. This specific absence of vehicular data forces the investigative teams to evaluate highly improbable extraction scenarios. The suspect theoretically transported the 84-year-old victim using purely physical pedestrian methods. This hypothesis requires the suspect to carry a significant biological weight across multiple residential property lines. They would need to navigate physical fences and uneven landscaping while completely evading overlapping camera fields. Every additional meter of physical movement exponentially increases the statistical probability of optical detection. The investigators are currently attempting to map a theoretical pedestrian route through the specific neighborhood blind spots. This process involves layering the infrared capabilities of 30 different commercial cameras onto a single topographical map. The resulting digital model leaves almost zero physical space for a successful pedestrian exfiltration. The continuous surveillance coverage essentially traps the suspect and the victim within a strict 2-block radius. Yet the physical reality dictates that the perpetrator successfully breached the absolute boundary of the neighborhood. They slipped through a digital net designed specifically to catch this exact type of physical movement. The presence of the blood fundamentally anchors the crime to a specific physical location and time frame. The absence of the vehicle fundamentally limits the potential velocity of the subsequent tactical escape. The investigators are trapped between the concrete biological evidence and the absolute silence of the surrounding cameras. The physical data points and the digital data points refuse to align into a cohesive operational narrative. The deeper the forensic teams dig into the missing minutes, the more contradictions they ultimately unearth. The perfect digital crime is slowly unraveling against the harsh reality of human biology and physical geography. The prevailing investigative theories are currently collapsing under the weight of their own logical inconsistencies. The mathematical parameters of the exfiltration route present a completely unsolvable physical equation for the authorities. If the unidentified suspect utilized a motorized transport, the perimeter optical networks would undoubtedly register the thermal signature. The high-definition lenses would continuously capture the headlights reflecting against the surrounding desert vegetation. The complete lack of automotive data absolutely mandates a pedestrian escape hypothesis for the active investigation. However, a completely terrestrial extraction introduces a massive logistical impossibility regarding the physical capabilities of the suspect. A solitary operator cannot physically transport an incapacitated adult victim beyond the immediate search radius before sunrise. The human cardiovascular system simply cannot sustain that level of physical exertion across the rugged Catalina Foothills terrain. The necessary velocity required to evade the morning neighborhood activity exceeds human physiological limitations. The suspect would remain hopelessly trapped within the immediate geographical sector as daylight illuminated the environment. This profound movement contradiction forces the behavioral analysis unit to constantly reevaluate their primary suspect profile. They are dealing with an entity that defies both digital surveillance and basic physical logistics. This structural paradox is immediately compounded by a highly specific environmental anomaly regarding the selected operational time frame. A standard clandestine extraction relies heavily on the absolute cover of environmental darkness to succeed. The absence of ambient light severely limits the effective range of standard passive infrared security sensors. Yet the suspect deliberately scheduled the reconnaissance and the primary extraction during periods of high lunar visibility. The recovered optical fragments confirm the perpetrator utilized the moonlight to precisely map the physical environment. This specific tactical decision contradicts every established doctrine regarding covert residential infiltration and exfiltration. Operating under a bright lunar cycle significantly increases the overall probability of visual detection by civilian witnesses. The bright ambient illumination also drastically enhances the operational range of the local digital camera network. A full moon in the desert environment provides sufficient natural illumination to trigger daytime color recording modes. Why would a highly sophisticated technical operator intentionally maximize their own exposure to the optical sensors? The behavioral analysts suggest the suspect required the ambient light to visually navigate a highly complex physical route. They needed the lunar illumination to ensure they remained perfectly aligned with the calculated camera blind spots. This terrifying theory implies the suspect valued precise physical positioning over the general concealment of darkness. They traded the safety of shadows for the absolute certainty of a mathematically perfect infiltration path. The investigation remains suspended in a highly volatile state of analytical tension and operational frustration. The conflicting physical and environmental data streams completely paralyze the standard law enforcement response protocols. Subscribing to Unsolved America ensures you receive the latest updates as these complex forensic contradictions are actively investigated. The authorities are staring at a geographical perimeter that was never breached by a recorded vehicle. They are tracking a pedestrian route that exceeds the biological limits of a solitary human operator. They are analyzing a stealth mission executed under the brightest natural illumination available in the desert environment. Every single forensic variable actively cancels out the fundamental logic of the preceding investigative hypothesis. The missing minutes represent a perfect vacuum where standard criminal behavior and physical reality cease to function. The investigators are attempting to solve a three-dimensional puzzle missing half of its critical pieces. The tension surrounding the missing surveillance data continues to escalate with every passing week of the search. The entire federal operation is desperately searching for a single variable that unifies these impossible contradictions. They require a specific physical mechanism capable of bridging the gap between the digital and physical realms. The current analytical models provide absolutely zero viable explanations for the successful disappearance of the victim. This mathematical impossibility persists until the federal cyber technicians manage to isolate a specific cluster of digital pixels. They utilize advanced enhancement algorithms to clarify a previously unnoticed geometric shape secured to the back of the suspect. The enhanced digital imaging reveals a specific nylon structure worn by the tactical operator. Analysts successfully identified the item as an Ozark Trail 25-liter capacity backpack. This specific recreational equipment completely defies standard tactical parameters for a rapid residential extraction. A solitary operator prioritizing speed and stealth avoids unnecessary physical bulk at all costs. The anomalous presence of this large container forces federal investigators to reconstruct their primary theories. Federal experts currently hypothesize the backpack did not contain standard burglary tools or physical restraints. They suggest the nylon exterior concealed a highly sophisticated mobile radio frequency jamming device. This specific technological hardware requires substantial physical space to accommodate large lithium battery arrays. A commercial-grade jammer possesses the capability to completely overwhelm localized wireless communication frequencies. The device projects a continuous sphere of electromagnetic interference, measuring approximately 30 meters across. Do you believe this civilian backpack actually housed a portable digital disruption field generator? An active frequency jammer effectively creates a mobile digital blind spot moving through the environment. It systematically swallows the transmission signals of every wireless optical sensor it physically approaches. This theoretical framework perfectly explains the absolute absence of visual data across the entire neighborhood. The perpetrator did not merely disable the primary optical sensor located at the target residence. They carried a portable technological void that actively erased their digital footprint during the exfiltration. If you find this specific forensic hypothesis compelling, you should subscribe to Unsolved America immediately. We will continuously analyze the ongoing federal efforts to validate this terrifying electronic warfare theory. The mobile blind spot theory fundamentally redefines the entire spatial geography of the Catalina Foothills extraction. The missing surveillance data is no longer confined to a stationary location on the concrete porch. The chronological blackout actively traveled alongside the perpetrator as they navigated the suburban residential grid. The camera lenses functioned perfectly, but their wireless connections to the remote servers were violently severed. The infrared sensors detected the physical movement, but the resulting data packets evaporated into the interference. This technological suppression allowed the suspect to bypass multiple overlapping security perimeters with absolute digital impunity. The surrounding neighbors essentially paid for expensive surveillance hardware that a single portable device rendered completely useless. The realization that an intruder can carry invisible digital armor requires a complete reassessment of civilian security. The authorities must now analyze the secondary electromagnetic signatures left behind by this theoretical jamming equipment. Federal cyber divisions possess specialized algorithms designed to detect residual frequency interference within regional telecommunications logs. They are actively scanning the historical data of nearby cellular towers for specific spectrum anomalies. A portable jamming device often emits a detectable electronic wake as it moves through a saturated environment. Locating this specific electronic signature would effectively map the precise geographical trajectory of the mobile blind spot. This digital map represents the only viable method for tracking the exact pedestrian extraction route utilized. The physical evidence remains hopelessly static, while the digital evidence requires incredibly complex mathematical decryption protocols. The FBI behavioral analysts are evaluating the psychological profile necessary to deploy this specific tactical hardware. The operator demonstrated immense confidence in their technological superiority over the localized civilian security infrastructure. They essentially walked through a densely populated digital minefield, utilizing a portable frequency suppression shield. This level of operational sophistication elevates the active threat assessment far beyond a standard criminal enterprise. The neighborhood surveillance network did not fail due to a lack of optical sensor density. It failed because the entire wireless architecture relies on highly vulnerable and easily manipulated radio frequencies. The technological advantage has clearly shifted toward perpetrators willing to utilize advanced electronic countermeasures. The active federal investigation currently operates within the 7th continuous week of intense operational deployment. The physical search parameters remain active, but yield minimal actionable intelligence regarding the primary target location. The Federal Bureau of Investigation continues to dedicate massive computational resources to analyzing local cellular traffic. They are systematically filtering thousands of data packets, hoping to isolate the specific frequency interference signature. The entire law enforcement response currently hinges on retrieving microscopic fragments of corrupted electronic transmission logs. The physical absence of the 84-year-old victim remains an agonizing reality for her family. The Catalina Foothills community exists in a permanent state of heightened anxiety and extreme digital paranoia. The official investigation currently faces two distinct and highly problematic analytical questions that demand immediate resolution. The first unresolved query involves the precise chronological placement of the biological event on the concrete. The investigators cannot definitively determine if the physical trauma occurred before the mobile jammer activated completely. Did the suspect inflict the injury precisely at millisecond 0 before the data stream terminated permanently? Or did the localized bleeding occur much later while the digital blind spot was fully established? The specific timing of the biological fluid deposition significantly alters the established timeline of the physical assault. The second unresolved query challenges the fundamental assumption regarding the ultimate geographical destination of the perpetrator. The total absence of vehicular data suggests the suspect never actually left the immediate residential subdivision. The authorities must evaluate the terrifying possibility that the victim was concealed within a neighboring unoccupied structure. The Catalina Foothills area contains numerous seasonal properties that remain entirely vacant during specific winter months. Did the suspect utilize the mobile digital void to simply transport the victim 3 houses down? This specific hypothesis eliminates the logistical impossibility of a prolonged pedestrian extraction across the rugged desert terrain. The federal agents are currently cross-referencing municipal property records to identify all vacant neighborhood residences. They must secure warrants to physically inspect every unoccupied structure located within the original electronic blackout radius. The operational reality dictates that the physical solution might exist mere meters from the primary crime scene. The authorities maintain an active tip line to process incoming civilian intelligence regarding the immediate neighborhood environment. They require local residents to report any subtle physical anomalies noticed on adjacent properties during February 1st. The official search efforts continue to expand outward, while simultaneously collapsing inward toward the immediate surrounding structures. The technical teams are working continuously to repair the fractured timeline using advanced data recovery methodologies. The regional telecommunications providers are cooperating fully with the federal requests for historical spectrum analysis data. The investigative trajectory remains completely dependent on deciphering the invisible electronic warfare deployed that Sunday morning. The physical search teams are effectively blind until the digital analysts successfully illuminate the precise extraction path. The current status of the operation highlights the severe limitations of traditional physical search and rescue protocols. The surrounding residential cameras have long since resumed their continuous data transmission to the remote cloud servers. The little red optical recording lights blink steadily across the entire Catalina Foothills neighborhood every single night. The hardware functions perfectly, but those stolen minutes of missing data continue to conceal the absolute truth. The digital void remains completely unbroken, despite the massive application of advanced federal computational analysis resources. The perceived safety of a modern smart home relies entirely on a highly fragile wireless connection protocol. A multi-$1,000 security system instantly becomes a useless plastic ornament when that specific connection drops. What this case teaches us about digital surveillance vulnerabilities requires immediate attention from every single homeowner. Relying exclusively on wireless fidelity networks to transmit critical optical data creates a massive structural security flaw. An adversary does not need to physically dismantle your exterior hardware to completely neutralize your defensive perimeter. They merely need to introduce sufficient electromagnetic noise to sever the communication between the lens and the router. Homeowners must urgently consider integrating hardwired optical systems that rely on physical Ethernet cables for data transmission. A physical cable connection remains entirely immune to the portable frequency jamming technology utilized in this extraction. The implementation of localized digital storage using secure internal hard drives provides another critical layer of redundancy. If the external cloud transmission is successfully interrupted, the internal physical drive continues recording the optical data. The vulnerability demonstrated in the Catalina Foothills proves that wireless convenience fundamentally compromises actual residential physical security. The neighborhood possessed exceptional visual sensor density, but lacked the necessary infrastructure to protect the transmission pathways. The digital illusion of safety evaporated the exact moment the tactical operator activated their portable suppression equipment. You must critically evaluate your own residential security architecture through the lens of potential localized frequency interference. The integration of redundant wired networks is the only reliable defense against this specific technological threat profile. The terrifying reality of the missing minutes continues to define the absolute perimeter of this complex investigation. The federal authorities remain focused on extracting a single, corrupted data packet from that specific temporal void. We will continuously monitor the cyber division as they attempt to decrypt the residual frequency interference logs. Subscribing to Unsolved America ensures you receive immediate analytical updates whenever the FBI recovers new digital evidence. Will the advanced computational algorithms ultimately expose the precise geographical path of the mobile digital blind spot? The entire resolution of this unprecedented residential extraction depends exclusively on answering that highly specific technological question. The optical lenses covering the neighborhood continue to record the ordinary movements of the surrounding suburban environment. When you observe the glowing infrared indicator on your own exterior surveillance camera later this very evening, you must recognize a disturbing truth. The most terrifying aspect of modern digital security is not the violent physical activity it manages to record. The true horror resides entirely within the silent, empty spaces that the technology is forcefully commanded to ignore.